Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in. As always, I am Kaylee Batesman, the content director at She Can Code, and today we're discussing neurodiversity. It is estimated that up to 15% of the UK population is neurodiverse. So shouldn't we be doing more to help support neurodiverse employees? Now, today I'm joined by the wonderful Carlene Jackson, CEO of Cloud9 Insight, who is going to dive into the topic of neurodiversity with me and discuss how neurodiverse employees can harness their superpowers and share what organisations can do to support their neurodivergent employees. Welcome, Carlene.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us for a chat. Can we set the scene a little bit with a little bit of background about yourself and what you do, please?
Sure. So I run a Microsoft partner business that helps clients in the SME and the sort of medium-sized space implement some of their cloud technology, particularly around sales and marketing. And I've been running the company for 12 years, so I guess you could call me an entrepreneur. And I'm actually dyslexic myself, so I feel I can talk from a first-hand perspective around being dyslexic. It's something that I've known that I've had formally since I was in my early 30s. I was doing a university course and I can't spell for toffee. Well, certainly some of the names of the things that I had to remember. And I thought, oh my goodness, I knew my parents were dyslexic. So I thought I'll get an assessment. And sure enough, it confirmed that I have, for me, I'm lucky it's just a mild dyslexia, but I've always been really aware of neurodiversity. Two of my sisters speak, sort of work with schools that have kids with severe autism. So I've always been, you could say, curious about all the different diversities. And I think what's great is that more and more people out there are talking about it. Like Elon Musk in the last couple of years has shared that he has autism. I was listening to a podcast recently and Simon Sinek was sharing that he has ADHD. So it's really very common, and I think that the more that we talk about it and help people understand what does that mean, and be confident to share their own neurodiversities, I think that's a great thing, because for me, I really believe that everyone has their own superpowers, and it's great to talk about that.
Yeah, did you say that you were diagnosed in your early 30s?
Yes, yeah, quite late.
Yeah, because it's something that I suppose you sort of think of at school, or, I knew some students at university, but I suppose actually, as you say, you can suddenly realise later in life as well.
Yeah, I had a hunch early on, but with my parents being dyslexic. For example, my mum, when my mum was younger, we had checkbooks then. And for those who might remember them, and at the back of her checkbook, she had the words like 1 to 20 written out as the spelling of those words in writing. And I said, Mum, why did you do that? And she said, because I can't spell any of those words. And I thought, okay, and it sort of made me have an appreciation for her own dyslexia. But I'm a summer child, and I think a lot of people put the fact that I wasn't great at my spellings, or I wasn't great at my timetables, anything that involved a memory, I wasn't great at. I was great at other things, like sports and art and anything creative. And I was always confident, but anything that required a test of memory, I probably wasn't so good at. And so I had a hunch that I was. And then when I was 18, actually my career aspiration, funnily enough, I didn't really think about it too much, but I actually wanted to be an air traffic controller. And I went on to get an air traffic control qualification, which I did in my spare time as a hobby. And then I applied to the Civil Aviation Authority, and I passed all of their aptitude tests. I passed all of their interviews. And they introduced a new test to tell your left from your right, because that's a common thing with dyslexics. They can't, if you tell them, if they're navigating for you, they might start shouting, no, right, and you're going right, but actually they meant left, and that would be me. But so I did this test as you might expect. I actually failed the test. It was I think it was a military test that they introduced, because too many people were failing at the end of the course. And if you're telling an aircraft to turn a heading, you want to be able to say it's left or right heading, whatever degrees, and you can't get that wrong, because clearly you might be taking avoiding action with two aircraft. You don't want them hitting each other. So it's quite important, of course. And so they invited me to come back the next year, and they said, you've only failed this one test, I'm sure you'll pass, apply next year, pass everything else. And then I thought about it, and you probably need to know my husband's an airline pilot, so it's like it's a bit close to home. So I thought, maybe I should give up on this. Like, as much as I really want to do it, I love the fast pace, which definitely tech gives me that sort of fast paced environment. I decided, you know what, this is people's lives, and I parked that ambition and stayed in tech because that's where I was, and I have absolutely no regrets, because it's a fantastic place where if you like a fast pace and you love to sort of where things are changing all the time, and you get challenged and you can solve real world business problems, I think there's no better place to be. And of course the earning potential, even if you have no degree, is fantastic as well, so it's another motive.
Yeah, there are wonderful benefits to the tech sector. We talk about them a lot on this podcast, because it's always a shame that people outside of the industry, I don't think, quite realise the benefits of coming and working in the tech sector. In terms of the tech sector, is it a great industry for the neurodiverse? We know, as we said there, it's a great industry for everybody. What about if you're neurodivergent?
I would say it's an incredibly amazing industry to work in if you have a neurodiversity, and there are lots of reasons for that. There are many companies that are even actively looking for people who have a neurodivergence. For example, GCHQ are always have an active recruitment stream for people with dyslexia. And so that might be around sort of cybersecurity. You're likely to be better if you have neurodiversity because of the way your brain is wired, to be able to spot patterns and problem solve. If you have autism, for example, high functioning autism, you're highly likely to be able to sit and do one thing for a long period of time, to be really sort of able to focus on if there is something around, for example, cybersecurity, your ability to code something, your ability to sit and focus would be at a phenomenal level compared to neurotypical people. People with dyslexia are well known to have fantastic problem solving skills, to be creative, to think outside the box. So for me, a lot of what happens with technology is actually around innovating new business models. Look at Airbnb and Uber, for example, their new business model. So the technology by itself is not enough. You have to have creative skills to sort of think outside the box as to applying technology in one particular way in another business scenario. And so that can help too. There's many people with ADHD who are phenomenally successful in technology as well, because their ability to sort of to multitask and to get stuff done, and ability, there's two different types of ADHD actually. So there are some that find it, some people have both actually, to both types, but some people with ADHD find it pretty easy to focus on something, very sort of get in the zone. If you give them, I don't know, a web development project, they would just be intensely focused and be able to get that done. And be very committed to achieving that to a high standard. So I think that what I would say is that for every different type of neurodiversity, there are different superpowers that you're likely to have. But everybody who has those diversities, they will have a different version of it. So just because you've met somebody who's had dyslexia at school, they might have had a very severe form and their handwriting is illegible and they can't spell, but you might have another person who's dyslexic like myself. I would actually say that writing is actually one of my strengths. I can write very well, and I can edit and copyright other people's stuff. And so I think this sometimes people have assumptions or stereotypes that they associate with different diversities. I think it's important to be open-minded that no two people are the same, even when it comes to neurodiversity, and that it's important to help people, and if you've got kids, to help them find their own superpowers, because they absolutely will have incredible talents that other people that are neurotypical wouldn't even have a hope to compete on.
And it's probably something, as you said there, everybody's very different, and everybody has different challenges. So it's probably something that people just don't pick up on if they don't know the signs, or if, you know, it is different for lots of people. Then, you know, just like yourself, it might be actually something that comes up far later in life than, you know, a parent noticing or a teacher noticing at school, if we don't quite understand what we're looking for.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting for me is that in my working career, actually sometimes you can uncover that you have a neurodiversity because your kids get diagnosed, because it is more sort of accepted. And so sometimes I've remember a situation where a guy came into work. He was actually a bit sad, and he said, "Oh, my child, who's quite young, has been diagnosed with autism." And then I remember myself and my colleague going, "That really explains a lot, actually, that his ability, his phenomenal loyalty to the business, which people with autism have, like they're likely to stay with you forever. They work very hard, incredibly committed personalities." And that was describing him. He was a phenomenal hard worker. We had to literally, like, he might be there wanting to work late at night. We'd have to say, "No, you need to call it a day, and you need to look after these people who have this immense loyalty to make sure they don't overwork." But it's incredible. And I think I would say the same for dyslexic people. A lot of dyslexic people have this almost subconscious thought of they're not good enough, or they haven't done very well, or they need to work harder to get the same results. So you tend to find that their ability to graft really is at a phenomenal level. And I've seen that very often. They can tend to be, it's almost like they're trying to compensate, so they just work super, super hard to get to the standards that they set themselves, which are usually very, very high, higher than other people would set for them. And that's, I guess, for a business, it's quite good.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you there about the benefits of hiring a neurodivergent tech workforce. But as you said there, you know, individuals that are incredibly loyal, especially, I suppose, if they find a company that's very supportive of them and very encouraging of them, then, as you say, they're going to be very loyal, and they're going to stick around for some time. But I suppose also just the diversity of thought as well. You know, you really don't want a team that everybody thinks the same way. So that must be an absolute benefit of, you know, a company hiring somebody that's neurodiverse.
Definitely. Well, I think there's so much happening in the tech sector that can automate things, but I don't think you can automate creativity.
Yes.
And so I think that if for any business to remain in business, you have to constantly innovate. You have to listen to your customers. You have to be able to spot trends, which many neurodiverse people are very good at. It's almost like, in my mind, neurodiverse people can sit in a helicopter above the world and see what's happening when other people are in the thick of the trees and they don't quite see it the same way. And for me, when I'm a very visual thinker, and so I find it very easy to explain complex ideas in very simple ways, especially using similes, for example, and metaphors, and also to draw, if I'm thinking about explaining, I don't know, it could be a marketing strategy. I find it very easy to be able to think of a picture that represents what we're trying to achieve and have everyone on the same page. And as a leader or a visionary, or even an entrepreneur and a business founder, the ability to be able to spot trends and to think of the bigger picture and link trends to potential solutions, and to be able to articulate and communicate that with people is really powerful and a huge asset for any company if they want to remain in business and to create huge value for their future growth.
Yeah, and it is one of those misconceptions as well, isn't it? That the tech industry isn't creative. And when you started your answer there, it was, you know, about the importance of being creative and having creative individuals, which, as you mentioned, they're just the superpower of having that bird's eye view of everything. I think that there is that, I don't know, just that myth, isn't there, that the tech sector, you don't need to be creative. You're just going to sit with your headphones on, code, and not talk to anyone.
Well, there's a lot of roles now, even technical roles, you might call it, that there's no coding. And certainly the products that I work with, Microsoft Dynamics, there are many projects that don't require any coding. It's more about sitting with a client and understanding what their business model is and how they what their processes are, and aligning the system in a sort of drag and drop way. It's definitely doesn't require technical skills, and we've had many people in our business who haven't come from a technical background. We had one young lady who had done a psychology degree, so she wants to be a data scientist, and so she's very good about sort of putting herself in other people's shoes, and she had strong empathy to be able, which women I think have in abundance often, to be able to sort of think outside the box, and to be able to, once you understand the technology, how can that support a business, for example. And so she adapted very well without necessarily having deep technical skills, because it's not always required to work in a consulting capacity to have that deep technical knowledge, or even coding skills. And I would also say, for me, one of the great things about, one of the secret ways you could say I've been trying to sort of attract talent, female talent into our industry, which definitely we need more of, is through the marketing channel, because whenever we advertise any marketing roles, it's amazing, there's very often they are females coming through, and getting them through and helping our clients is a great way of doing that.
Yeah. And what about yourself as well, as an entrepreneur and a founder? Did you find, you mentioned there, obviously there's so many roles in tech that don't require you to be techie. Is that something that you thought before you founded a business? Did you think, oh, I have to have all these technical skills to be able to do that? You know, you sharing that you're dyslexic yourself, did you think there were going to be challenges there?
I would say over the years, I probably have always had an interest in technology. As a young kid, for example, I had a Commodore 64, and I'd even go to the library and buy books on sort of doing BASIC, and I really enjoyed doing that. The bit that I didn't enjoy was the debugging it if it didn't work. I didn't think I had the patience. I wasn't brilliant at that. However, I've always been super interested in technology, but I've never got to a deep technical level, because actually, when I joined IBM many years ago, I was hired in a sales capacity, and I've spent a lot of my career in sales, which is also a very rewarding role in tech. And so part of the induction for me was they sent me on a course to learn how to develop the product, which was a COBOL, couldn't be more technical. And so it was quite glamorous in some ways, because I was sent over to the States, to Newport, Rhode Island, which is a beautiful place with an amazing team. And so what I learned really quickly was to use my charm as part of teams to make sure that if I needed to do the exercises, that I had help. And so, being the only female, I think, on the course, I had lots of offers of help to help me. So it proved not to be an issue. What it showed me is to put yourself in a place of your strengths and ask for help when you need it. And actually, one of the pieces of advice that I give to my female colleagues when they join is, guys always love to help. And so women, if you want to play to your strengths, often aren't ashamed to ask for help. So take advantage and don't be shy, because many of your colleagues will absolutely love to help you in anything that you may need. And I think what I often do is probably pretend that I'm a bit less technical than I am, and then I get all these offers of, can I help you? And it's fantastic. So I've had that mindset of never really minding sort of what I don't know, because there's always someone who does. And if you're not shy to ask, then there's always many people willing to pay it forward and support you. And also these days, many resources online if you're good at self-learning, to help you as well.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, with online learning, especially in the tech sector, there are so many wonderful resources to draw from. In terms of neurodiversity, do you think there are certain negative stereotypes when it comes to neurodiversity?
I'm sure there are. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. Like I mentioned earlier, people assume that dyslexic people can't read and write, and I couldn't be further from the truth. I read, like I've got what feels like a library of books, and I love to read and I love to write. But I think it's important that what they need to understand is that people with neurodiversity, their brains are wired differently. And so the way they think, the way they come to decisions, the way they possibly even process information or see information is just different. And if you don't, if somebody doesn't appear like you, then it's just really important to try and understand, well, what are their strengths? What are their superpowers? And I just spend the time to get to know what do they ask them? What are your unique superpowers? Or if you are, if you do have a diversity, then a neurodiversity, then to share with people. I would encourage people, if they're applying for jobs even, to share that. And you might want to say, hey, I have sort of mild or high functioning autism, and how it shows itself is I'm especially good if you give me this, this and this, and I might need extra help with this, this and this. And the same with any neurodiversity. I think it's really important. And if you've got somebody with ADHD, it might be that you need to just help them prioritize, because they'll try and do it all, or everything's exciting and they'll probably take on too much. So give them fewer projects with clear deadlines. And yeah, I think that can help. So I think you just need to spend the time to get to know what people's superpowers are, and make sure you're not overlooking using those in the business. I do recall there was somebody in my business who had neurodiversity. It was undiagnosed, but it was quite clear to me because he was so highly creative. He had on any subject you may ask him about, he had just a huge, incredible spectrum of ideas, and they were all brilliant, I would say. The only challenge is just there was so much of it. So, but I think you do need to create a space for capturing, and because some of those ideas, I'm sure, you won't want to take forward, but many of them could be creating phenomenal future value for your business if somebody in your business is able to spot those trends and leverage those for your business growth.
Yeah. And is there anything that you think companies can do? I mean, you mentioned there are a few things, that teams can do, helping somebody prioritize their tasks, for instance. I suppose as well it's about educating other people on the team as well about how they can help that individual. Is that something you've found yourself?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would say encourage a conversation about it, because it's better to make people confident that they can share that they might have a neurodiversity. Yeah. It could be that you, if for example, you know that somebody has autism, high functioning autism, you need to make sure that the manager understands how that may impact their performance, and in terms of, for example, making sure they take breaks, making sure they don't work too hard, making sure they leave at the end of the day and don't overdo it, because that can lead to maybe their home life might suffer, and then that will then have an impact, or potentially they might not be eating properly if they're working too hard. Somebody with dyslexia, don't ask them to do something in the corridor that they then have to remember when they get back to the desk. What was that I was asked to do? Because I certainly couldn't remember. You might have difficulty in remembering names or things like that. Certainly I do. And so if you've got an event on, encouraging people, or you have even a large internal event, it might be helpful to put people's names and departments or whatever. It could be that you have, this is what I do, I've got a A4 posters, you could call it, with people's pictures and names and what they do and a bit about them. And as the company grows, and that can make it easier to remember everybody's name if you're not great at that. It could be that you have systems to help people organize their work. And so if you don't have a sort of CRM system, for example, for managing your callbacks, or if you don't have to-do lists or things like that, but just making things like planner or to-do lists or things like that available to the employees so that they can manage their workload better would be quite important as well. So I think, yeah, just having good levels of communication and creating a safe environment where people are not shy to share where they might need extra support. It might be that you assign a buddy to somebody who is informed about what somebody's challenges might be, so they have somebody, or it could be a mentor, so they don't feel isolated from the norms. So if you've got a company full of, I don't know, more highly I don't know, sort of numbers focused people or whatever, then maybe you might feel intimidated by that. So it's just creating a safe environment where you feel you can be yourself.
Yeah. And what about the employee themselves? You know, what can they do to harness their own superpowers at work?
So I would encourage them to, if they're not aware of, if they haven't yet discovered their superpowers, then certainly spend time to do so. I think for me, it was actually, it was an incredible time for me when I actually had the diagnosis, because until then I felt, you could say, maybe a bit more intimidated and negative about some of the traits, and I always assumed everybody was like me. And I think maybe we go through life assuming that we're all on this spectrum of normal, and then when I realized that actually people don't have a million ideas a minute, and when they're walking down the street, that people don't have for me as a dyslexic, I have an abundance of energy, and that's a lot of people don't, or I have an ability to see things very visually, other people don't. So just try to appreciate that actually how you think is assume that it's actually different, assume a lot about you is different, and try to discover how, whilst there are some annoying things that you might, for me, for example, if I was to write a shopping list, I couldn't spell probably most of the things, the words on the shopping list, because I don't write those words every day. If it was business terms, I could spell them perfectly. So try to be kind on yourself for the things that aren't your strengths, but also try to appreciate that actually the things that you took for granted about how your brain works are unique to you and others with that neurodiversity, and to really absolutely embrace that. And it might be that you could set up, if you're in a big organization, you could set up some larger groups to sort of to share experiences of and then the more you learn about other people, they might go, oh, I think like that too, or yeah, I have that. Yeah, I found that easy, or I found that a challenge. And people have different strategies for how they sort of organize themselves and how they apply their talents. That can be a great thing.
Yeah, and I suppose it's always remembering as well that they are an advantage to you. I think you use the word they're different, and you sort of think I'm different or I think differently, but actually it's not a negative thing, and that you can use that to your advantage in the workplace. But what do you think? Do you have any advice for neurodivergent employees who are struggling at work?
Maybe they're in the wrong role.
Yeah. Absolutely right. If you don't feel supported, then you're right.
Or they could be in the wrong company if they're in a company that isn't sympathetic or supportive, and there's probably a few out there like that. I would encourage employees to sort of talk about, be really open. I remember years ago, I was working with a membership organization, and I was in sales. I was a sales director, and I worked with this IT director in a client of mine. And for me, as a dyslexic, I could see black and white. He was dyslexic. I could see that, and I didn't feel the need to say that to him, but I could see how and where he needed support. And I think that it's important to be confident that in your own talents. And I think if you're in a role that doesn't value the superpowers that you believe you have, I think you need to find a new role. If the organization supports you and you feel supported to be you, and there's a new trend in sort of workplace psychology, which is called strengths-based, sort of it's playing to your strengths really. And it's important that you understand, have a hard think about what are your personal strengths and how might your business really value and use those strengths, and just be like, at the end of the day, if it was me, first of all, you can't be fired for being neurodiverse, so don't be shy to share that you have a neurodiversity. be clear in your mind about if you had a magic wand and you needed extra support, what might that be? It might be just somebody being clear on what the priorities are. It could be sort of if you feel you have a particular talent and you're if, for example, if you have ADHD and you're just given a really what you might feel is a boring role that's not challenging you, you're going to be really unhappy. So make sure that you share the fact that you need to be challenged and you need variety in your role. If you have autism, the chances are you won't want to stand up and present. You won't want to be at conferences, possibly, or busy or new environments. You want stability and predictability, and you want people to work with people that you know, not to be thrown in the deep end with lots of new faces. That would be a highly stressful situation. So it's really important that you are honest, and I can't imagine it being anything but stressful for any employee who's in a position where they're not playing to their strengths and they can't be themselves. They're masking the challenges and the stresses, and stress over time can take its toll on you. And I think there's so many thousands, if not millions, of jobs out there that would be perfect for you. So be brave and make a change, and just become more self-aware of how your unique strengths can be a phenomenal value for any employer.
Yeah, and I think, and as you say, you know, for any employee as well, being at a company where you don't feel anybody's really listening to your needs and how you like to work is incredibly stressful. I remember thinking sometimes I might have been in working sessions, you know, where you're supposed to put words on Post-it notes and put them on the wall, and I'm standing there thinking, I'm quite introverted. This is not how I like to work, and I'm not, you know, in this creative vibe that's supposed to be happening. I would rather just disappear and go and do my own working in my own time and come back, or, you know, even present back. But I think it's just a company or your team listening to how you work well. And obviously, if you're neurodiverse, that comes with a unique set of challenges. So it's just finding that company that really listens to you and believes you, instead of, you know, trying to push you to be somebody that you're not. We are almost out of time, and I just wanted to ask you one more thing. What more can be done to raise awareness of neurodiversity in the workplace, do you think?
I definitely think that first of all, at the recruitment stage, I think if people are applying for jobs, I think that one thing that we do is we ask people what additional support they may need. And I think it's a legal obligation anyway that you can make reasonable adjustments for anyone in the workplace, but to encourage people to think about it based on their personal situation, what additional support systems or other things. And so having that in your recruitment process but I would suggest that you do that after offer, not before offer, so that you're not seen to be prejudiced to just making making available the support that people may need. I think it's always great if a company has the opportunity to offer buddying or mentoring, or even both sort of systems, so that people feel that they can go to someone who's not their manager if they feel they need support or help, or somebody who they feel they might say, I'm really struggling with my workload and I can't manage all the different priorities and I'm not sure what to do, and they feel like they're failing. Actually, it might be that because of their neurodiversity, they just need a little extra coaching on being prioritizing or organizing the many different things that are coming at them. And one thing that ADHD and dyslexia people are very good at is coming up with so many ideas of things they need to work on. They can be overworked, and so it might be you need someone to come along and go, actually, do you know what, that's just a bit, you don't need to be doing that. Let's be realistic. I certainly need to be grounded myself. I have so many ideas, and I think that's important. And I think that if you're, I think it's great. It's great practice anyway for any business, but to make sure that if there are actions agreed in a meeting, that they're written up and shared, because they can be, for people who have dyslexia, for example, they might find it more difficult to remember stuff. There's a lot of technology as well that can transcribe. It could be meetings or other things. So if you can make that available in different forms, that's great. to, if it's appropriate. So for me, in my business, for example, I'm setting up a learning management system which we called Cloud9 Academy, and it's really a fantastic way of us recording content that helps people in their career. And so certainly for some learners, they might need to look at it more than once, or maybe just a meeting isn't enough. You know, if you're being taught how to use something new for the first time, it might be helpful to sort of record that and make it available for them to go over it a few times, for example. So there are some of the things that we do. I also have for a number of people in my business, I've purchased a Remarkable, which is a digital notepad, which for me, if I don't write something down, it's probably not going to get up in my head. So
yes.
And if you're on a computer, you don't always want to be typing. So yeah, maybe giving them access, like if in a week I could probably fill a few notebooks with my notes. So having a digital Remarkable pad has been life-changing for me and many others in my business who I notice they write a lot. So it doesn't mean they're neurodivergent, but there's a highly likelihood that they could well be.
Oh, okay.
Especially if they're highly creative. If they're always the person with the ideas, there's a likely chance they could be.
Oh, I see. And it's interesting as well that you know, a lot of this stems from just making sure that you mentioned it a little bit before, that you speak up and that you're not shy and that you ask, because I think probably a lot of neurodiverse people, they might have had a bad experience, perhaps it might have knocked their confidence and they feel like they just can't ask. But actually, from the sounds of it, you know, the more you ask, the more people are just willing to help and to come up with solutions like you just suggested. So I think it's probably just staying positive and asking for support.
I would agree. And my sort of state of mind around neurodiversity is, I think that my ambition is that we'll get to a stage in our society where everyone is valued for being them. You appreciate that everyone has something unique about them. We're all we all have different things to bring, or different talents, and that we're not treated as clones, we're all treated as unique. And that, in my view, certainly as a dyslexic, the dyslexic people are less likely to have gone to university. So it's important that employers don't prejudice about, oh, I need them to have a first, because, well, unlikely necessarily most of the dyslexic will necessarily get a first because their memory wouldn't be as good, or maybe because of how they've been treated at school or made to feel stupid, because their poor memory, that they might not have attained the grades to get the course that they wanted. So there've been so many barriers put in their way. And so in my view, that our society is the challenge in how the society thinks. I think that eventually, my point of view is that eventually we'll all be cherished as unique individuals, and that society won't have the stereotypical negative perceptions that are holding people back. And I certainly don't allow that to happen in my world. I feel phenomenally gifted, very lucky. I would never not be dyslexic. I feel there are so many, especially entrepreneurs and highly successful people in the world who have a neurodiversity. And recently I was invited to talk about entrepreneurship at London Business School, and I asked for a show of hands for people who had different neurodiversities, and it felt like about sort of 50 to 60 people in the room, about a third of the room put their hand up. This is like the creme de la creme of society, of intelligent people. So that's how I view it. I think that if you're lucky enough to be neurodiverse, make sure you don't waste it, because sort of ignore the stereotypes and find your unique you and talk about it.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, that's a lovely positive point to end on there, because we are out of time, Carlene. I'm so sorry that we could talk about this all afternoon, but we're already out of time. So thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us today. It's been really, really interesting.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And to everybody listening, as always, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.